Hello, welcome everybody. I'm Sarah Steffens, the Worker Power Director for Rebuild Progress. As we get started, please introduce yourself in the chat. We'd love for you to share your name, your pronouns, any affiliation you may have, and where you're joining us from. And before we start, I have just a few housekeeping notes. First, we're going to dig deep into policy discussions tonight, but we will not engage in electoral or partisan conversations during this session. And second, just a heads up that today's briefing is captioned and recorded. We encourage you to ask questions of our incredible panel throughout the event. Drop your question in the chat and we'll get to as many as we can. Um, I am so honored to introduce our special guest, the Deputy Chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, Representative Ilhan Omar, who represents Minnesota's 5th Congressional District in the greater Minneapolis area. An experienced Twin Cities policy analyst, organizer, public speaker, and advocate, Representative Omar was sworn into office in January 2019, making her the first woman of color to represent Minnesota. Thank you so much for joining us, Representative Omar. Immigrant rights is a personal issue, I know, for you, and you've gone above and beyond during these last weeks and far, far before that to stand for your constituents in real and meaningful ways, whether that's helping get little Liam home, conducting oversight at detention centers, to holding hearings in the field. How can all of our elected leaders best meet this moment and fight the rise of authoritarianism?
Thank you, Sarah. It's good to be here with you all. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and thank you so much for the invitation. I would say it's a big question here in Minnesota. First of all, we're very, very much grateful to the incredible Minnesotans who have introduced themselves to the country and to the world in their courage, in their love, in their solidarity, in their compassion and most of all in their resistance. I could not be more proud to be Minnesotan, and even more prouder to have the honor of representing Minnesota here in Congress. I think it's been really important and sorry about my voice, I'm nursing a cold. It's been really important, I think, for all of us to meet this moment. We all knew going into Trump's second presidency, having Project 2025 out there, that we all had to get prepared and we had to ready ourselves for what was to come, because it wasn't going to be a guessing game like it was in his first administration. And so one of the first things that we did in my office is that we in December held an event for all the immigration lawyers in our district. We invited all of the organizations that help with immigration because we wanted to understand the lay of the land, and we wanted people to be in one room, at least connecting in some way. We wanted our staff to also be familiar with everyone else. The second thing we did, and it was the first time that we did this because it was important, was for us to actually engage with DHS. So we actually made a visit to the Whipple Federal Building so that we can meet DSH agents. And I remember one of their lead attorneys said, you know, I've worked in many states. The one state that makes me nervous is Minnesota, because you all are too organized and too well connected. And you know, he was foreseeing what was to come, and he actually just quit and is no longer working for DHS. And so I think he tried to warn them, they didn't listen, and he finally understood that this wasn't an agency he wanted to be associated with. You know, that's the kind of advice that I give to other elected officials. One, trying to like prepare yourself and your district and your staff, so that everybody kind of knows where everyone is at, who has what capacity. Make sure that we are getting release forms from folks that might be vulnerable, understanding where different detention centers are, because we don't have a lasting detention center where people can be held for a long period of time in Minnesota. We are fortunate enough for that. We also know that many of our counties are not ones that collaborate with federal law enforcement. And so it was an easy assessment for us to make. And so it might be harder for a lot of other districts to be able to do so. And once we saw the surge, we wanted to be part of the community and be part of that response. And so not only were we responding when our community members were disappearing, but a lot of our staff, actually one of our staff got maced. They were out there being part of the people who are bearing witness to what was taking place on the streets of Minneapolis and across the Fifth. We also wanted to make sure that we were taking part of mutual aid. A lot of our staff, both on the campaign side and official side, have been driving, food packages, essential packages to community members who are sheltering in place. And we have done multiple get to know your rights trainings. We were one of the first congressional offices to have Know Your Rights page on their official website. And we continue to do immigration resource fairs so that people are able to actually like meet us in the community and they don't have to come to our official office. So I think those are all the ways in which people can show up for their constituents and meet this moment.
Thank you so much. Incredible work you all are doing. Um, this turns out to be a really timely conversation. We're less than a day before the temporary funding for DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, expires. Can you share with us just a little bit more about where Congress is in those negotiations and maybe what we can expect?
Yeah, I would say when we had about 27 members of Congress come in to the district for a field hearing, I think that was sort of the spark for members of Congress to actually hear and take a stand. Because what we heard before we did the hearing, we had a dinner for the members of Congress and community leaders who came to share their firsthand stories of what they were experiencing. And 99% of my colleagues who were there said we didn't think it was this bad. And so I think it became a lot easier once they were there and in community with us, able to hear those testimonies, see it for themselves as we drove around the district, the kind of occupation we were living through, for them to come back to Washington and help us lobby the rest of our colleagues to put together a list of 10 demands that we wanted to make. Things like unmasking agents, things like making sure that they actually have a badge, things like making sure that their uniform is uniformed, that people are able to know who they're dealing with, trying to introduce legislation to take away the qualified immunity that federal agents have. And so right now we have the White House that has been negotiating with Senate leadership and House Democratic leadership. We are not at a point where they are even close to meeting our demands, and so we will continue to hold still until we are able to get them to agree to what we think are, basic law enforcement demands.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Congresswoman Omar, for joining us and for everything that you're doing. Please keep up the fight for not just Minnesota, but all of our communities. And we know you have to run and that you're busy with the people's business, but we're really grateful to have had some of your time this evening.
Thank you for having me. And I know you have incredible speakers coming up. So I want to
Yes,
say
we
hi
do.
to
Yeah.
a lot of my friends that I see on the screen. Love you all.
So next, I'm excited to turn it over to our incredible panel of Minnesota leaders. We have Eliane Farhat, the Executive Director of Take Action Minnesota, which serves as a hub for Minnesota's progressive movement and builds power for a government and an economy that works for all of us. Minister Janae Imari Bates. She's the co-executive director at Faith in Minnesota, a multiracial, multi-faith coalition of faith communities dedicated to racial and economic equity in the state of Minnesota. And Jennifer Arnold, the executive director at Inquilinos Unidos, I hope I said that the best I could. United Renters for Justice, which builds tenant unions, educates renters about their rights, and advocates for safe, affordable housing. So we all know Minnesota's incredible neighborhood resistance wasn't built in a day. It's actually based on decades of work. But also, it expanded exponentially in the midst of ICE's attacks, and it's operating at a scale that's really unprecedented. The enormity of this crisis has required everyone to be creative and expansive in their response and to work together in new ways. So I wanted to just start by trying to understand a little bit, how do longstanding organizations work alongside these new organic informal networks of everyday people? And Eliane, maybe I can turn to you first.
Yeah, happy to start. I'm glad to be with you all, and always grateful to share space with the folks on this panel and Representative Omar. Um, the place I begin answering that question is with people. Whether it is the networks that emerge in our neighborhoods to keep our neighbors safe, keep our children safe, keep our folks housed and fed, or it's an organization like Take Action Minnesota. The thing that moves all of that forward are people choosing to lead, choosing to be brave in normal times, to be braver than we ever have to be in the times we've been through, and to keep choosing to lead, to keep choosing to take responsibility, to keep choosing to care and be courageous. And I start there because when I think about the networks and our institutions, much of the overlap I think about are with the people and the relationships that connect us and knit us together in different ways. It's sort of, they're like overlapping spheres or Venn diagrams. Someday we will have a beautiful graphic maybe that describes it well. And so when I think about the networks, I think about myself as someone very connected to institution, organization in the state, but like a Minnesotan and a mom of 3 young kids who go to daycares and schools. I'm a sister and an aunt and a daughter of immigrants, and my life and our lives have been turned totally inside out, upside down, as we in our everyday ways show up for our family, for our neighbors, to do everything we can to keep people safe, to share good information, to support the infrastructure that got built. And so the thing I want to say about the networks, the way you describe sort of informal networks, and that can make people think like sort of there's some like randomness or disorganization or just like pods of people. And the thing that I really want folks to understand about what's been built in Minnesota because people chose to lead and take responsibility for caring for our neighbors, is that it's incredibly well organized. It's incredibly disciplined. It's incredibly rigorous. And it's incredibly mission driven because we understand the stakes, we understand what we're up against, and Minnesotans are committed to doing that work well. And it's as tight and strong as any sort of formal organization you might think exists. But then the way it sort of begins to interact with our institutions, Take Action also is filled with people, members, and leaders who are also choosing to build for the long haul. And the space that both the sort of independent networks as well as institutions like Take Action fill, we really think about how are we stepping into the breach of the space that has been created in our communities by the lack of care, by the violent forces we're up against. And what Take Action members and what neighbors are choosing is to step into that breach and help keep people housed, to help share information to keep folks safe, to patrol schools, to show up on the front lines and legally observe, to use every single right in our toolbox, to show up for our neighbors, to show up for democracy, to move us forward. And so for Take Action, what that looks like and where it sort of intersects with this particular moment is we have a base of parents and caregivers in Minneapolis, part of a group in our organization called Minneapolis Families for Public Schools, who saw the moment potentially coming, saw what happened in Chicago, and said, we want to be ready in case we need to keep our schools and our kids safe, and started laying some initial ideas similar to what Congresswoman Omar was sort of talking about in her organization. Many of us started preparing for this moment. And as the surge started and took off, so did that organizing. And really many parents, many caregivers, but then neighbors have just shown up every day at school pickup and school drop off, have been facing the most terrible aggression from ICE agents, sort of tear gassing, concussions, violence outside of our schools, taking our children, and then building the infrastructure inside of our community that frankly has fallen apart, and government has not stepped in, keeping folks housed, delivering groceries, giving kids ride to school. That has been one of the key pieces that we as an institution have also delivered via our organizing and our building in this moment. And it's also much bigger than anything we, our institution ourselves, like built ourselves. And so that's how I begin to think about how the networks and the institutions overlap. There's both the work that's connected and the people that are connected, and it all reinforces and supports each other in different ways. And I know Jen will speak a little bit more to this dynamic too.
Yeah, I was hoping, Jennifer, that you could weigh in on the same. I know you're involved in a number of different ways as well, personally.
Yes. Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I love going right after Elian because it's beautiful to be able to talk to what I've experienced. So I am an institutional leader, but I also am a parent of a second grader in a South Minneapolis elementary school. And so I had started to build relationships at my son's school, of course, over the years that he has been going there. And when this emergency happened, I found myself in the trenches with other parents, right? And in the trenches means trying to find a way to keep our own kids safe, getting our own kids safely to school and able to safely participate in things like recess, which my son didn't have for the whole month of January because of the ICE agents in our streets. And also making sure that other families who could no longer go to school had their basic necessities covered, right? And like Elian was naming, we have decided as a community in Minneapolis that we will not stand by and let our neighbors go hungry. We will not stand by and let our neighbors be brutalized. We will watch, we will film, we will do the things that we are allowed to do. Um, and speaking of those networks, our school network has grown and includes the folks from the elderly folks who live close by in a group home who've decided to come out and be on the streets during pickup and drop off in the morning and in the afternoon. It includes, it's everyone is involved, and it's not folks who were previously active, right? I got to know a lot of families through Minneapolis Families for Public Schools, and everyone I'm deep in it with now are not folks who were involved in that. It's folks who have stood up to meet the moment. And just to say a little bit more about these networks, I think of them also as a bunch of intersecting circles, right? They're groups of people who have gotten together around schools, around block by block measures that are connected in different ways, and we're doing primarily two things. We are sharing information with each other and filming when ICE shows up, because sharing information with each other is really key. It's not just for folks who are stuck at home. It's also for people who are picking up their children and need to safely arrive at their own home. Many times these agents are using tear gas and other things, and it's not good to drive through what's going on. And so it's really important that we're sharing information with each other. And the second thing that we're doing is we are supporting each other to stay safe at home, if that's what, a family has decided to do. Because again, we're not going to stand by and let kids in our community go hungry. That's really not okay with us as Minnesotans. And on the institutional side, I organize with renters and have done that for a very long time. And in this time of community connection that is happening, because of the emergency, we have decided to work with other renters in the city to launch the Twin Cities Tenant Union, because we want to build the container to hold those relationships in the long term. We know that this is not the end of the slide toward fascism, and we are going to continue to build so that we have durable institutions that can continue to work together to build the community that we all believe in, right? A community where we care for one another, where everyone can get their basic needs met, regardless of their identity. Um, and so that's how we are stepping up to meet the moment, is to say, let's build a space to collect these relationships and help serve and continue to build them over time, so that we strengthen each other through this emergency and difficult time that we have been living through.
It's so inspiring to hear you both talk about the response and what you all are building together. I also wanted to uh, highlight the key role that faith leaders have played in this fight. So, faith networks have been organizing mutual aid around Minnesota, leading singing resistance. More than 100 clergy people put their bodies on the line at the January 23rd action at the airport. Minister Amari, can you talk a little bit about the organizing that produced such a strong response from people of faith?
Yeah, I mean, what I think has been really beautiful, and I've been saying this in a number of spaces, but the way in which Minnesota as a whole has showed up in the midst of this crisis is a living, breathing sermon. Like it is the Good Samaritan lived out in a show don't tell. And what has been really remarkable is the way in which faith leaders have come out. And it is, rightly as you've named, it's a lot of organizing that happens to make that possible, to create the infrastructure for that to be possible. And I think Elian named that here in Minnesota, many of us read the tea leaves long before January 7th, after the murder of Renee Good. And so in the beginning of 2025, our organization knew that we were going to need to build a real muscle around rapid response, particularly for faith leaders and for clergy. And so we started this thing called Lighthouse, which is larger than just Faith in Minnesota and Isaiah. It also includes Jewish Community Action. It includes an organization called PRISM, but it is faith leaders across the state, hundreds of faith leaders who have been enrolled into a rapid response network where we're able to get information to one another very quickly, but in a way in which we're truly organizing as opposed to just mobilization. So we are built into a wrapped around strategy where all of the faith leaders get to have agency. They are enrolling the folks within their mosque or their temple or their synagogue or their church. And we started to build a muscle around it, frankly. So, I mean, even starting with like the big bad bill back in July, there were some tests where clergy got to come out and like speak out against the cuts to Medicaid that we were having in Minnesota, or the cuts to SNAP. And so by the time we got to December, our organization had a 5,000 person meeting where we pulled together faith leaders and other folks who organize within in our organization. And in that meeting, it ended up being really a training about, what do you do? What will we do when we have the big red line crossed around having to truly have a real counter to authoritarianism? And at that time, I mean, we organized with a little over half the Islamic mosques here in the state. Many of them are Somali. And we had just heard, some rhetoric about our Somali neighbors being garbage. We knew that there was this like amplification that was happening to try to divide us. And this rhetoric was really about, trying to tear us apart, and most certainly trying to move resources in a way that was harmful, like taking resources away from Minnesotans. And so in that 5,000 person meeting, we actually talked about the way in which, there was another 5,000 person meeting in 1955 that took place at Holt Street Baptist Church, where they started the Montgomery bus boycott. And that boycott was highly strategic. It was a bunch of faith leaders who were thinking more expansively than just their church, who were talking about, what does it mean to put in a real strategy to organize people. It was where they started to put together the pieces that made sense on even the selection of Rosa Parks, who was not just a woman whose feet hurt, but she was carefully selected among hundreds of people because of her ability to manage her emotions in a particular way, because of the hue of her brownness. And so even like down to the bus route and the time in which she made the declaration that she was not going to move was all strategy. And it was a beautiful thing to have a bunch of faith leaders say, yes, we are leaning into our faith. We are going to love our neighbors so loudly, and we are going to do it strategically together. And so that is how we were able, in this rapid response network, to be able to show up for one another, for all these many, many systems moving through our churches, to have sets of mutual aid, but also to have vigil after vigil after vigil that is about creating space for people to experience their anger and their sadness and their grief, but in a collective and in a way in which we can take our anger and use it as a scalpel to cut out what we know we need to remove, as opposed to a sledgehammer to smash everything we hate. And it also made it possible for faith leaders to continually show up against the corporations that have been silent in the midst of this, complicit, even making money off of what is happening. And so it's why it was important for us to show up at the airport, where we are now at over 3,000 of our neighbors who have been taken out of this state, who have been abducted and flown out of the state just since the first of this year. And so showing up together to pray for those neighbors, to stand and bear witness, even to the point of risking arrest. We had a very similar action just today outside of Signature Airlines, where 200 clergy and faith leaders showed up together to pray and bear witness, as that is the airline where those 3,000 neighbors are being flown out. And it is, it's a beautiful thing to be with a bunch of folks of faith who are really leaning into their faith, like praying with their feet, doing the things that they profess from pulpits and synagogues and temples and churches every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and to say we're really going to live this life out loud.
Um, Amazing. I want to continue on this a little bit, and we have a lot of organizers and activists joining this, listening in on this conversation. And I want to talk a little bit about how do you work to center the needs of Minnesota's most impacted families in all of this community response? Because we all know in the best of times, it's not easy to get activists on the same page about strategies or tactics. And then let alone right now when there's a rapidly changing threat, like things are evolving all the time. So, and any of you could answer this. How are you handling those kind of conversations, and how do you manage to change tactics in real time, knowing that, there was a lot of upfront organizing that sometimes has to change?
I'll go quick. One of the things that is really important to understand around a lot of the infrastructure that's been built to really care for the families that Jen was talking about, who have decided to stay home for various reasons, for their safety. The support infrastructure that is wrapping around them is extremely hyper local. So we're not building huge infrastructure and taking in lots of resources in one centralized place and then having to manage massive distribution and create all these systems. That's not what we have done. In fact, we have said, no, we're not going to do that. And we don't need to do that, because neighbors are taking care of their neighbors. And everybody is getting taken care of by the people who are closest to them on their block, via their school, via their church, their mosque. There are the different sort of nodes of community are connected, are sort of pooling resources and getting that to the people they're connected to. And so those types of questions are getting figured out, but they're getting figured out in very hyper-local ways, in deep relationship and deep commitment to getting folks what they need.
Yes, and the thing that I know, I'm sure, since we do have a bunch of activists and organizers who are joining us, is that we also are in relationship and deeply organizing with these folks every day. So we, and as well as those of us on this call, we don't organize activists. We organize regular Minnesotans, like regular folks who are just trying to make it day by day, which means that we are in deep relationship with folks who are at the center of the pain. I had mentioned we organize thousands of Somalis and who have been like the major target or at least the excuse as to why Minnesota is deserving of the kind of violence and harshness that we've experienced. And so being in deep relationship with folks who are the closest to the pain is absolutely necessary if you're talking about being like in true relationship as we are trying to create the solutions to these crises.
Yeah, I think I can just add a small amount here, which is to say, at the beginning, I felt this in a really strong way because I am one of those connectors that bridges communities. I have a lot of relationships in the Latino community and am bilingual. And what's been really beautiful about this moment is that I am not the bridge for everything that happens even in my immediate community, right? Those connections are now made between families who don't share the same language, but are in deep relationship and regular connection about needs and support. And that is so beautiful. And that will not go away. That's going to last here.
I wanted to ask about a question that came up a lot. We invited people to submit questions as they registered, and a lot of people had questions about operational security and safety as you're doing this kind of work for themselves, right? But also for their neighbors. So, how are you thinking and talking about safety in leading this response? I know it's a big question.
I mean, I can start a little bit here. So, certainly safety and security is a thing we all want. And we all continue to be, frankly, because ICE hasn't left here yet, in a sphere where safety and security is not guaranteed. And we know that it is not just a threat of violence, but active violence is happening around us. And so the way in which I know many of us, because we've all been in partnership on a whole set of different actions and things, we're always thinking about we are most certainly thinking about our leaders and who they're connected to and how we can try to keep people as safe as possible, with also recognizing in organizing one of our tenets is that power protects. You have to build real power. And there is real power in being public. And most certainly, we're taking very calculated risk in how we do that. Thinking about the who and what kind of backgrounds may make them more vulnerable to attacks. And that's like both like digital attacks, like physical attacks. Um, but we also recognize that if we actually really truly want to have safety for now in the long term, we have to build power. We have to build real people power, which means we need real relationships that are durable, that are long term, that have built sustainable trust. And frankly, we get to build a lot of trust in a lot of the consistent actions that we're doing together. And so as we're moving together, we are wanting to and needing to stay in real relationships so that we can ensure that we're, practicing really good, digital hygiene and security measures as we're moving through this new type of world for us.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that one?
To borrow Jen's phrase, the small thing I'll add, and I love that Janae, power protects. It's like so true. And what I think about a lot in that vein is what the people we're up against want is us to be afraid and small because it makes it easier for them to move forward their terrible, like cruel, evil agenda that is a violation of everything we believe in as humans in this world, as Minnesotans, as Americans. Like it is a violation of our values. And if we stay small and quiet and scared at home, they win. And what Minnesotans are choosing every single day is in the face of that. Like we're scared. I'm scared. We should be scared. If you're not scared in Minnesota, you're not really paying attention. But in the face of that, we're all choosing to be brave and courageous because that is the thing that is going to keep us safe. And that is the thing that is going to build the world that our children and future generations deserve. And so part of what's and key piece of how they keep us small and scared is by spreading a lot of misinformation, or you see some like sort of almost like test balloon threats getting thrown up by some very like right-wing actors who have a history of online or even in-person violence. And their goal is for it to spread around in a set of ways that takes us over, that consumes our information channels, that consumes our brains and stops us from acting. And so one really important piece of the digital hygiene Janae is speaking to, but also the relationships that we're all building, is to have a high degree of discipline about how we're sharing information, what information we're sharing, making sure that we're moving it with intention and care, because it is important to share information that is true, that will make sure more people can make the best decisions to keep them safe. It's also true that if we spread bad information, we're actually feeding right into their hands, and feeding into their strategy of scaring us and keeping us home and quiet and small. And so having real discipline around information sharing, vetting information, being organized and ordered about that is one of the most important things we can do to keep ourselves safe and secure.
Thank you so much for speaking about that in such a real way. I want to turn to our siblings in the labor movement now. It's my honor to welcome Bernie Burnham, the president of the Minnesota AFL-CIO, where she focuses on building cross-sector solidarity among affiliated unions, making the labor movement more inclusive for traditionally marginalized workers, and growing the number of affiliated unions across the state. So I wanted to ask about the January 23rd statewide day of action, which was an incredible success. Ordinary people stopped their economic activity. 800 plus small businesses closed in solidarity, and dozens of unions participated in various ways. So we so often, especially right now, hear activists calling for a general strike. But what do movement people need to understand about organizing this type of mass action? What does it take to prepare?
Well, thanks for the question. I think most of the people who are, as you say, are activists and organizers on this call tonight understand that collective action doesn't happen overnight, right? It takes months of organizing and lots of planning. So you need to make sure that you've got, the majority or at least almost everybody committed to the action that you want to take. And we know that if we don't have enough people there, the strike isn't going to be effective, right? We got to make sure that people aren't going to cross a picket line in our world. That's the way that works. So for the mass mobilization on the 23rd, which actually did come together very quickly within a week and really amazing and impressive, I think, that speaks to the organizing work that's been done for years, I'll say, in Minnesota. And all the folks that are on tonight with us have been a part of lots of organizing that's been going on for 10 plus years, and we're all in good relationship. And sometimes we don't always agree, but we know that when things are important to taking care of Minnesotans and families and working people, that you've just got to get together, right, and make sure that things happen in the right way. One of the other things that we do and has been done, we get called on often to help our different affiliates with strikes. And so we often train marshals. So our organizing director, Todd, is an amazing guy, and he's trained well over 300 people to be uh, union peacekeepers. And so these folks are not just union people, though. They are community members as well who have joined in that tactic. And we need those folks to come and be disciplined and committed to making sure that, as to the best of our ability, we can keep people safe. And it does go back to a lot of trust building within the community. And I'll say, and again, we've all been working together for a long time. And so we have the relationships that are built, and we are continuing to build the trust and trying to build the relationships because we are part of a greater community. Nobody does this alone.
So one thing people don't often realize is that union members, when they're working under contract, can actually be limited in their ability to participate in a strike. So what are some of the creative ways that you worked with this in order for union members in Minnesota to be able to participate on January 23rd?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we did not call for workers to walk up the job because many people cannot. They simply can't due to their contracts, right? And we don't want them to be under any harm or due to the National Labor Relations Act. There is collective bargaining. It's the law of the land, but there are also guardrails that if they're broken could mean that unions can lose their representation. So, um, some of the things that unions did was to try to, maybe get their contractors to give everybody the day off. Or I know in the case of my own union, Education Minnesota, they called on educators to, wear same colors, to do something good for your neighbors or community. And let me be clear, teachers are working hard every day with their students in and out of school because many kids are not going to school right now out of fear, and so they are, like during their lunchtime, they're collecting. They have bought groceries or collected food from their community and putting those meals together. And then after their work hours, going out and delivering meals to their families that are part of their school. So a lot of different things. People try to be creative so that they could still be a part of the movement in the way that best suited their union.
Whether it's a general strike or a social strike, if you want to call it that, an economic blackout, how do you know if you're ready to call for that kind of action? How do you know when it will be successful? Like you said, that people will join.
Right. I think it's just a matter of really, again, trying to have those conversations. We are closely aligned, obviously, with the National AFL-CIO too, and so we have those conversations at the national level, which carry out through all of our 50 states. Um, I think, there's not one union in the state of Minnesota and probably across this country anymore that hasn't been impacted by the actions of ICE, and so. Uh, it takes a while for people to get there sometimes. Not everybody's on the same page. And all of our unions, there are members who believe one way and believe another, right? So um, I think the best you can do is try to get people to agree to at least support and then act in their own way. I don't know, and I will tell you from the national table that a general strike is hard to call because you want it to be successful, right? You don't want to do something and then have it fail. We're just not, I don't think anybody wants that. But I think that we've shown in Minnesota and with our partners and our community relationships that we have stayed strong and we have built a strong movement here.
Thank you so much. I want to turn now to two of our close collaborators who are here to share some ways that everybody listening can take action right now. First, we have Sammy Chavin Grant and the Deputy Political Director at Indivisible.
Hi, everyone. Great to be with you. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening, for activating in this moment, particularly to the folks on the ground in Minnesota. It is a privilege to share space with you this evening. Your leadership and your really important, vital work is just really grounding in a moment that I know is really alarming for folks across the country. But something that I want to share, listening to Congresswoman Omar at the top, we're in a vital moment. There are active negotiations, and I know it can feel really daunting to think, okay, I'm going to pick up my phone, I'm going to call my member of Congress, I'm going to send an email, and I'm here to tell you that that is a genuinely meaningful way you can act. You can call an email every single day, and it is breaking through. The reason that there isn't funding moving forward for DHS like business as usual is because of millions of people around the country, be it with their local Indivisible group, another local organization, or just independently on their own, folks who are saying, you know what, I can't just sit here. And I know often a piece of pushback I get from folks, oh, my member is a Democrat, they're going to vote the right way no matter what, or my member is a Republican, they're going to vote in a particular way no matter what. This is a moment that is breaking through. Regardless of political ideology, we are seeing people be willing to listen. And I will say, As somebody who it's like my professional expertise, they count the number of calls they get on an issue. So something that you'll receive as a follow-up to this conversation tonight is a call script and an email tool from Indivisible. We've made it really clear the demands are in alignment with what we've been hearing would actually meaningfully make a difference on the ground. So that's really the distinction that we're going for at this time. It's not enough to, just enact a guardrail that really allows business as usual to go on. We need to see the violence stopping in local communities. So I just want to say again, thank you for having us here. Thank you for your partnership. And folks, it does genuinely matter that you call an email right now. And if you've already called and emailed, text the links you get to a close friend, because I bet you know somebody in another state who could use that impetus to act. So thank you all for being here tonight and for the work that's been ongoing and the work we'll continue to do together.
Thank you so much. And next we'll hear from Bishop Dwayne Royster, Executive Director of Faith in Action.
Thank you, Sarah, and good evening, everyone. I'm Bishop Dwayne Royster, Executive Director of the Faith in Action Network and a member of the steering committee of the Organizing Revival Networks. Our hard work in organizing, the hard work in organizing that has occurred in Minnesota, led by these powerful people that have been on here tonight, has borne fruit. ICE is on its way out. That happened because ordinary people chose courage over fear, discipline over chaos, and solidarity over division. But let's be clear, our job is not over. Authoritarian forces don't retreat, they regroup. They move from city to city, state to state, testing where we are weak and hoping that we are tired. But what we're saying tonight is simple. We will be ready. We are building something bigger than a single victory. We're building a durable, multiracial, interfaith, working class power that can outlast any one administration. Power rooted in principled non-cooperation with authoritarianism and long-term governing strength. Here's how you can step in. The Organizing Revival Network has been running pro-democracy boot camps. Come and equip yourself with the skills, strategy, and community you'll need for what's ahead, from mobilizations and rapid response to mutual aid and sustained organizing. We're already trained thousands of organizers. In 2026, we're going bigger with anchor actions in Tennessee and Massachusetts, Florida, Nevada, and beyond. Join us and stand alongside the people who will be with you for the long haul. The second thing you can do after you've gone to a pro-democracy boot camp is you can go to organizingrevival.com and you can download the full pro-democracy boot camp curriculum. You can read a shared paper that Organizing Revival Networks put together called The Antidote to Authoritarianism, and you can sign up for the Organizing Revival newsletter. Next, you can join our listening campaign. Take the Willing to Fight pledge and share it with your congregation, your coworkers, your neighbors. If we are going to defeat authoritarianism, we must bring millions of new people into political homes. And for those of us in places that we do faith-based organizing, political and spiritual homes, not just in moments of protest, but long-term belonging. We must strengthen local infrastructure now so we are prepared for the next Minnesota. And the next Minnesota, unfortunately, is already starting to happen. Participate in local campaigns that expose corporate complicity and impose economic and political costs on authoritarian enablers. If there are calls for action in your community targeting corporations like AT&T, Target, Amazon, or Hilton, show up. Let's hold corporate power accountable. Participate in the upcoming mass mobilizations, No Kings on March 28th, May Day on May 1st. Show up in a disciplined and solidarity for noncompliance. And then we want to invite you to become an architect of a new America with us. As this nation marks 250 years, we refuse to let that anniversary be captured by white Christian nationalism or hollow patriotism. The 250th is a contest over the meaning of democracy itself. We're reclaiming it, not as nostalgia, but as a renewal of multiracial democracy rooted in justice, love, and shared power, beginning on Juneteenth in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and continuing through July 10th in Washington, D.C. We'll organize teach-ins, public actions, moral witness across the country. We will lift up the freedom struggles that expand this democracy, and we will share our vision for the future of this country, a democracy that truly belongs to all of us. This is not a moment for spectators. It's a moment for disciplined hope, for organized love, for collective courage. Thank you for being a part of this shared effort to stop authoritarian consolidation and build governing power that reflects our values. Thank you for being a part of the organizing revival. We can win, and together we win. And not only will we change America, but we'll change the world. Blessings, everyone, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Bishop Royster. I told you there were a lot of organizers joining us here, participating in this conversation today, and you can tell that from the questions. So we're going to try to get to as many of them as we can before we run out of time. And I want to remind everybody you can continue to use the Q&A to leave your questions. Here's the first one I'd like to start with. It's many of us around the country are seeing signs of impending ICE occupation in our communities. What are the things we should be doing now if we have only weeks or months to prepare? And anyone who's spoken here today is welcome to answer that.
I'm happy to kick us off. I think I can give a really simple answer, which is get to know your neighbors, right? Like this is done on a block by block way. And so the first step, and it's way easier to get to know your neighbors when folks are still able to leave their homes. So get to know your neighbors now. That is the building block of this kind of resistance.
What else? I can ask a follow-up question on that was even more specific. One of our participants go ahead, Minister Amari.
No, it's so funny that Jen said that because that's exactly what I was going to say. Like if the very first building block is get to know your neighbors. And then certainly because these are, if they, there's organizers on the call, it is about building power with those folks. So actually starting to build, some power with people and actually organizing them, and getting them in community with one another, creating those connections. Especially, yeah, if you're reading the tea leaves, start doing that right now if you're not already.
So our even more specific question from another person who's here tonight is, what are the top 5 things you would want to have in place if ICE was going to come into your community and do a surge like you saw in Minnesota? So let's assume we've met our neighbors. We're starting to build things. Are there things that might be a good idea for people to get going right now?
Yeah, the top 5 things, that's not possible. I will not answer that. I refuse to answer that. I didn't prep for it, and it's a little bit hard. What I would say, yeah, I think some things that are really important. So being able to communicate well is really important. In sort of non-urgent times and also urgent times, there are lots of ways to build communications infrastructure. And in many ways, we got to go back to like the old school phone tree, y'all. I mean, we got to be like really thinking about the ways we used to communicate, or like house meetings, neighborhood meetups, particularly when you build a sort of individual relationship, you then need to figure out a way, how does a group start communicating with each other? Many of us, we have cell phones, we've got text groups, we've got emails, like there is all of that. And that layers in important ways. And there are lots of toolkits out there about how to do communication digitally in good, safe, secure ways. And it is also important to build real in-person relationship for that communication. And so doing neighborhood meetups, one of the most important things that sort of created the undergirding of a lot of the infrastructure that we see moving in the state right now were, neighbors calling a meeting at a local church, or, sometimes local elected officials using their platform and their connection to say, hey, let's meet up at this school and let's get in relationship and let's break into neighborhoods and let's meet our neighbors and let's create a infrastructure. Let's see who needs some support, who wants to sort of work on support infrastructure, who wants to work on sort of safety communication infrastructure. That type of comms infrastructure really important, and having people's numbers and being able to call people, really important. One time, I'll just say, like, one time, Jen and I were actually doing in this training together, and she got a call from somebody in need and was able to call other people, and like tap them into support. And so building that type of also like layers of connection, layers of people who are ready to move, layers of people who are ready to show up in moments, because we can't all be ready to move all the time. So I think that would be the other thing I would think about, is like, how do you build teams of people who are ready to move together in a way that you can hold it? Like, it's the problems in front of us are huge. Like, they're massive. And Minneapolis, St. Paul, like, we're not small, but we're no means by the biggest place in the country either. But any of us can't cover everything, And so really identifying the team of people that you've built that communication infrastructure with, and then what is your sphere of influence? What's your sphere of control? What are you going to take responsibility for? And building a team who can do it, who can tap in, tap out, make sure that there's clear leadership, clear roles, who's sort of on point, so that in moments of crisis, because that's what you're preparing for, like the everyday tending to each other and care for each other, and you're also preparing to be ready to move very quickly in the face of the worst. And it's overwhelming for me to sort of think about how often we actually have had to face the worst over and over and over again. And having layers on our teams who could show up was really important as folks need to move. And so much of our infrastructure, frankly, there's a lot of people doing a lot of things, but there's a lot of moms. There are a lot of moms holding this down. And that means that, like, we show up with a lot of ferocity and clarity and, like, ready to, like, stand in that breach for our babies. It also means sometimes our babies don't let us leave our house because they're sick or something, And so being able to tap in and tap out and have that in place really make sure that you have coverage and nobody is expecting something that doesn't happen. Those are two things that I would say are good things to start once you've met your neighbors.
I think I'm going to add to that a little bit. Eliane talked about this with tap in, tap out. I think you also have to, because I mean, we are on day, I think, 74 here, and people are tired, right? So we have to learn to be able to teach people to also take care of themselves, because there's only so far you can go sometimes. And so people have to understand and be able to give each other grace and help people. Say to someone, you need a break. I can see it. You're tired, and be able to be, then I'll take your place now. I think that's really important when you're lasting as long as this has, and it just feels like that's really key to being able to be clear-minded and to continue to make good decisions along the way.
Thank you for that. Besides rest, which is clearly so important, are there other things that have helped keep people's spirits up, to keep participating in the fight, to keep engaging when it's been difficult or scary, when things that are really awful are happening or hard to deal with emotionally?
I want to speak to a little bit to the last question, but I think it actually taps on this as well. Because frankly, I have felt, yes, it is like scary and very hard to deal with all of the things that we've been dealing with here. And also, I have never felt more grounded in purpose and mission and commitment to one another. And I think part of that is like that, and there's a lot of energy that comes from that, because you know that you're fighting with a win and not for it, if that makes sense. And so I think part of that is one of the learnings that I've gotten, is that you have to remember that we are not at peacetime. And I know that that sounds really simple, but there is so much in us that constantly wants you to go to normal. Like, oh, I wish things were normal, or your immediate reaction to something is to do what you've always done before. And we are not at peacetime. which means you have to push yourself to actually do things differently, to take different risks, to build different relationships. Like I said, we've organized faith communities for a long time, and it has been in a particular way. We have built an immense muscle in the last 3 months around rapid response that we just never did before, that we are doing, civil disobedience and direct actions, things that we have never done before. The way in which your whatever kind of organizing, activist, advocacy space you're in, get in relationship with organizations that are different than yours. We have built deep, deep, deep partnerships with labor unions, also with advocacy organizations. We're a base building organization, but like being able to really appreciate and respect the different tools and ways in which different entities function and like how they can contribute to the greater we when we all have a very similar opposition is really, really helpful. And I know, all across the country, Minnesota's no different. There's going to be like headbutts or like, we don't know if we rock with this group as well as that group or whatever. You have to let all of that go. We are not at peacetime. And we have like a real common thread. And most certainly here in Minnesota, it was like a direct violence, not even just the threat of it. And so recognizing that and recognizing you're not at peacetime and that it's okay to let go of your project that you planned out as some 2-year thing and you're trying to figure out how to make that still work. No, let it go and move forward and build new relationships and cultivate your old ones so that they're fit for purpose for the moment you're in.
Thank you for that. I want to do just a couple of more questions. We're a few minutes past the hour, but with the panel's permission, I wanted to get a couple more since we have so many more than we'll be able to answer. A couple of you mentioned how important it has been to hold corporations accountable. Can you talk about why that needs to be a central part of this kind of response? And again, that's open to anybody who spoke here today.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in here. If folks, this wasn't originally in the resources I shared, but if folks visit the Ice Out for Good website, Indivisible has been anchoring with a lot of groups on this call and around the country some corporate facing actions. One of the bodies of work we've been holding in these times is that the pillars of society need to change and that all components of the world around us have a place to organize and a place to engage. And so corporations only function due to the people that engage with them, because at the end of the day, consumers are what corporations focus on. So we do have, like Bishop Royster mentioned, several aligned actions that are ongoing. And so that really is a key place to engage and a place to be disruptive in a new way that has been effective. If folks have been following the Avelo Airlines piece or the fact that Spotify is no longer running ICE ads, these disruptive actions are a key part of advocacy that, when we think about how we spend our dollars, something I saw, in solidarity around the country with the actions in Minnesota, if folks, maybe couldn't go no spend, they were going low spend, or there were organizations, I live in Washington, D.C., that were donating the proceeds of their business that day in part to local businesses in Minnesota. So there are a lot of ways that the power of our dollar can go even further. And I'd love to make sure you have that link, Sarah, to share with folks so folks can see those actions that we're taking. But I know Bishop Royster also mentioned them, and other folks on the ground also may have some flags there as well.
Yeah, we can make sure that gets out to everybody. So based on what we all saw from Minnesota in videos from people who are documenting, there are likely hundreds of agents, maybe administration officials that are facing potentially long prison sentences for the way that they behaved. Qualified immunity doesn't apply here. How how do you lift that up? How do you make sure that people know that it is not, in fact, you know, a free pass for people to act however they want, and that the rule of law still applies? Big question.
here's what I would say to that question. I mean, this is maybe I'm the person that's like, I'm not going to answer that question. I'm going to answer something a little bit different about it. I'll be that person. I did want to say quick on the sort of thing keeping us moving song. I really want to tell people learn how to sing. I mean, you don't have to learn how to sing, like learn how to sing songs together. There's a great group locally called Singing Resistance that has just song keeps us moving and connects us in very powerful ways. And my connection to the question is what grounds us here in this moment is a deep belief that we keep us safe and that we act in ways that uphold and advance our values. And we connect and build power so that we can demand of our government, of the systems that we are building, that they hold people accountable. And that is one of the most important demands that we have in the state of Minnesota, that anybody who breaks our laws, anybody who violates our values is held accountable. And in recent moments, that means that ICE agents who have broken our laws, who have violated our constitutional rights, who have murdered our neighbors, Alex Preddy, Renee Good, are held accountable. And we know that accountability is not justice. And so also being deeply committed to understanding together and building a plan together for what it looks like to actually recover from the trauma, pain, destruction that we just went through. This will be a long haul. Things are very damaged here, very broken. We are very hurt. Our children are forever changed by the fear and trauma that they've experienced. And so it's a big question that is going to take a long time to resolve, but at the center of it, it is people holding true and clear to our values, committed to our relationships, and to building power to make sure the systems that we participate in and that govern us hold people accountable and deliver justice one day.
I don't think we could end on a stronger note than that. So I will resist the temptation to ask another question and just extend my deepest gratitude to our incredible panel, to Representative Omar for joining us. We appreciate all of you for sharing your insights and for the work that you're doing to stand with working families, fight back against oppression, authoritarianism, and injustice, and for the inspiration and example that you're setting for people across the country. And to all of you who joined us here today to be part of this conversation, thank you so much. If you registered for this briefing, you'll get an email with the links that you heard about here tonight, links to a captioned recording of this briefing as well, and then the relevant resources from our panelists. So if you want those resources and you're joining from the live stream, jump over to bit.ly resist reimagine Minnesota. Or if you're on Safari and bit.ly isn't working for you, just Google resist reimagine Minnesota and register, and we'll make sure you get those materials too. So thank you so much. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And thanks again for being with us. Take care, everyone. Stay safe. Keep fighting.